Hello, Mary Meet. This is going to be a video response to Pagypsian on her video about divine gender stereotypes. First of all, I did find your video very interesting, and I felt like I wanted to respond. Now, to me, when you're talking about divinity and stereotypes, and gender stereotypes, you're really more talking about energies. Because if you look at most spiritual systems, they either base themselves on divine duality at the end of the day or a trilogy. There can be a lot of different gods and spirits and deities within the system, but generally, at the end of the day, one believes in a duality of energy. So it might be better to look at, for example, yin and yang, which doesn't really say this is a physical woman, this is a physical man, where you more look at here we have energies. And I mean, if you look at nature, we have the same thing. We have electrons and neutrons and how they are dual to one another. You have very much the same concept that you have the feminine energy, which is nurturing, passive, and is the one that is acted upon. And then you have the male energy, which is the positive one, that are the one that acts. However, this doesn't mean that a living woman, or a man for that matter, have to follow these ideas. This is because when you look at yin and yang, there's always a little bit of yang in yin and a little bit of yin in yang. There is nobody who are just masculine or just feminine. Goddesses and gods in various forms of systems very much are the idealization of a concept. I mean, within Egyptian mythology, that even became very clear with what they call the gods, the nether, the concepts. So they are perfect archetypes, and as such, of course, the goddesses, for the most part, become quintessential archetypes of some sort of female idea, and the gods become a quintessential archetype of a masculine idea. This is, for example, why, a little bit off topic, but why my old teacher said that when you're choosing a craft name, do not choose the name of a god or a goddess, because they are already perfect. They do not grow. They are perfect representations of their sphere. Now, of course, there are definitely gods that have a more female role and have a more feminine attribute. And there are goddesses who have a more male one, like, for example, warrior goddesses. And there are gods that are seen as loving, nurturing fathers. However, from the uh, basic point there is that it follows those archetypes, that duality of the masculine and the feminine. Now, of course, when you look at a human being, there's we are a mix of these ideas. Now, I believe that a gender identity, definitely, your gender identity is not always your physical body. Definitely. However, neither do I think that gender identity is just some sort of social structure. The only reason that there are any difference between genders is because of social ideas. I mean, there's so many kids who has been raised and not in a particularly gendered way, you still develop these ways to typically act. Basically, males are typically more aggressive than females. And for example, you mentioned physical strength. Yes, there are women who are as physical strong as males, but generally women are not. Basically, women are on average 10 to 60% weaker than a male at the same age and level of fitness. Of course, there are unusual uh, individuals, just like you can say that I think in Norway the average height of a male is about 180 centimeters. 180 centimeters. However, there are those that are 190 or over 2 meters. They are exceptional individuals. But but strength is still then a male attribute. Just as there are definitely fathers who are as good and loving and nurturing as a mother would be. But that nurturing and caregiving is still a female attribute. But there's nothing wrong for somebody to have attributes from outside of their physical gender. For example, I am territorial, I am aggressive, I am quite physically strong. All of these being male attributes. I am also nurturing and emotional, and quite a few things that goes with the female. We are all a mix of this. Gods, however, are not really a mix because they are perfect archetypes. Let's take the goddess Freya from Norse mythology. Freya is the archetype of a love goddess. She's the goddess of love, women, and magic. And those things she is the quintessential image of. So then it comes to do one miss out if one do not have both a god and a goddess in worship? Well, I'm not saying that one cannot have a very good spiritual life focusing on only one of those sides, or focusing more on one side than the other. However, I do think that you will get the same problems that, for example, Christianity at times get, when they focus just on the masculine. That almost exclusively it's masculine ideas that are being appreciated. Now, I definitely think that you can celebrate that duality with goddesses or gods for that matter. You can have a typical mother goddess for the female representation and a warrior hunter goddess for the male one, definitely. But it's very difficult to. I think I personally think you do need that balance presented in some way or another, and just acknowledging at some points that the other side exists, I think will create problems with imbalances. However, I also think that each person has to find their spiritual path and spiritual view as they themselves desire. So, yeah, do I believe there are uh, gender stereotypes within gods? Yeah, definitely. Uh, and I also think that I have no problem with that because they are representations of energies. They are representations of ideals. So Thor is the representation of the strong male. He is the god of thunder. He is force. It's completely okay that he has that archetype. That being said, within the mythology of Thor, he at one point has to dress in drag to be able to regain is, I think that's when he's trying to regain his stolen hammer. He regains things quite often. And he is also a loving, caring father. So even within the gods, there are a bit of duality in each, usually. However, they are perfect beings within their spheres, and as such will be much more straight, square stereotypes than something that are not as such a perfect representation of something. So, for me, I generally see the goddess and the god as yin and yang. And there's always a bit of yin and yang, and there's always a bit of yang and yin. There's always that duality. But that there's definitely a idea of male divinity and female divinity. And yes, sometimes the female divinity are not represented by a female god. Sometimes it can be a god, a male god, who represents that female divinity. And sometimes it can be a female god, a goddess, that represents the male divinity. I definitely think there are that duality there. The idea of the female attributes, the male attributes, and perhaps it's even wrong to call them the female and the male attributes. That we have a duality, we have light, we have darkness, we have heat, we have cold, we have passive and active, and that our world are driven around by that duality and the interplay between those, and that we have come to recognize one set of that duality as being more feminine and one set of it to be more masculine. And that I think that doesn't have that much to do with society, because I think that if you strip society away, you would still have that general idea, that general tendency of females being more towards this end and males being more towards that end, even if there's nothing wrong with somebody stepping out of the norm there. So yeah, that's my video response. I hope you have liked it. Have a great day, and blessed be.